So this morning's talk title is A Life of Courage. And if we go to the Greek for courage, it literally means of the heart. And so what we're talking about is a life of the heart. Yesterday when we were setting up over at the Shakespeare Club, a gentleman came in thinking that he had an appointment to check out the venue. And we got to talking while he was waiting on his son and daughter-in-law, who were getting married there, to come. And he was sharing about his youth in Catholicism and how what took him away from that is there wasn't enough heart in it for him. That it was really heady and it fed him for a while, but then he realized he needed something that connected more with his heart, because as he grew older and experienced more life, what he recognized was that the one place he could always find God was in his heart. That when he couldn't find it in other people, when it was obscured by people's behavior, the one place he could always go to find it was his heart. And I believe that is absolutely true. That it's so easy because we live in a physical world of duality, which is the antithesis of our actual nature. Our nature is oneness. And yet everything around us looks like separation. And so our journey is to bring that together. Ernest Holmes talks about we don't deny the physical appearance of reality. Everything is as real as it is supposed to be at its level of reality. This is a real lectern, just like it is. It's not illusion. It really is real. If it falls on you, it's going to hurt. If you try to pick it up, it's heavy. If you try to pick it up from the top, it's going to come off. Just so you know. We do ourselves a tremendous disservice when we get in these mental gymnastics about this isn't real. Because it is. Is it ultimate reality? No. It is conditioned reality. And our task, our invitation, is to understand that within us is absolute reality. That it was born in us within a container of conditioned reality. It's quite paradoxical. And yet, in oneness, there really can't be a paradox. And so we can get really stuck spinning our wheels in the headiness of science of mind. And we're really good at that. If we're being really honest with ourselves, we're really good at the thinking part of science of mind. And then there's that place of moving into the heart of science of mind, where our absolute reality lives. And that place where we find the courage, the heart, to take responsibility for how our lives are showing up. I can't take responsibility for anything that's happening in your life because it presumes that I have the authority and the power to control you somehow. And I don't. I've got, next week it'll be 35 years in recovery. And we hear this phrase, it gets better, it gets better, it gets better. And I think it's one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves in 12-step recovery. Because it just keeps being it. I get better. If I do certain things, I get better. But I don't even know what it is. What is it? You know, it's this catch-all category. If I don't like it, it goes in the it box. I don't like how you're behaving, it'll get better. Put you in the it box. Rather than doing the hard work in our heart. I was having a conversation with somebody who was struggling the other day. And what I described to this person, how I was, because they were asking for feedback, and I said, well, this is what I see. You get right to that thing that is the core issue, and it's like, oh no, let me look over here about something. Okay, I'll work on this, work on that. And then because it's your core issue, it keeps showing up, and so you move away the stuff off the top and you go, no. And you come over here and you work on some, no. That's the thing that is requiring our courage. What is that thing that keeps showing up time and time again that we run from? Because here's the good news. If you've been living with it all this time, clearly it's not going to kill you. Clearly it's not the threat that you think it is, or something drastic would have already happened. And if it shows up everywhere you show up, it just might be yours. It just might be yours. And we get in the habit of pointing fingers. That if so-and-so would get their act together, I'd be just fine. And if the government would do this, we'd all be just fine. And. And the truth of the matter is, when we know the truth of our being, when we decide we're just fine, then we are. It doesn't mean life stops happening. And I think that's part of what hangs us up, is that we think sometimes that making myself happy, creating the life I want to live, will somehow change what you do in my presence. And it doesn't work that way. But what does happen is I stop focusing on you. I stop giving all of my power to you. Because very often what we do is that we pray and we meditate. Okay, I'm all good for my day. And we open the front door and life hits us square in the face. And instead of remembering, okay, let me recenter, we go, here's all my power. And what we're stepping into in those moments is victimhood. If you're familiar with the 4 kingdoms of consciousness, the first kingdom is life is doing things to me. Life is happening to me. It's happening at me. And that is complete victim consciousness. It means I don't have any power to change anything. And folks, ain't a word of truth in it. Not a word. I don't have the power to control other people, but I have absolute power about how I experience it. Second kingdom of consciousness is when we move out of victimhood into that really powerful place of arrogance where I'm doing it all. Not God through me, but my ego. I'm doing it all. And I am in control. And what I say goes. And the problem with that is that we generally harm people in our wake when we do that. Because we disregard other people. I'm going to get mine no matter what, at the expense of anyone and everyone. And it's an incredibly selfish place. And it's in my experience of moving through these kingdoms, kind of like this, because you don't get to stay in one all the time. We move through them and weave and bob. There's just as much fear operating in I'm doing it all as there was in victimhood. It's just the flip side of the coin. And then what's available to us is Kingdom 3, where the divine is doing its work through me. And that's where I have enough awareness to own the idea that I really might just be a creation of the divine. And so I can at least allow the idea that it operates through me. That I have an ego, which is a good thing because none of us would be on planet Earth without it. Okay? This isn't about smashing your ego, it's about understanding its place. That it's a passenger, it's not the driver. It's that part that gives us our human presence. And it's not necessarily the greatest idea to let it lead the show. And so we begin to compartmentalize that. And we recognize our humanness and we lean into more of our divinity. And we let the divine happen through us. And then there is Kingdom 4, which I have touched a couple of times and wish very much to live there far more often than I do. And that is when we recognize with absolute certainty that the divine is living its life as us. That everything I am, that everything I do is the divine in form operating. That my humanness and my divineness truly are in that alignment of oneness. And what I can tell you is in those moments where we touch that, it is both amazing and terrifying. Because what happens in those moments where we surrender so fully to the absolute, none of this matters anymore. I get goosebumps just saying it. That what created all of this lives right here as me. It collides with 58 years of conditioning. And that brief moment of bliss very quickly turns into cognitive dissonance. Because it challenges everything I believe myself to be on the human level. And we're not raised, some folks are. There's a few folks that I've met that have actually been raised in science of mind, and I know I'm not supposed to be envious, but I am. You know? Because they were raised with these principles. The rest of us are navigating all of the stuff we were raised with, much of which had nothing to do with principle and everything to do with power and control. And then we come to this place of, I don't need to control anything. I need to surrender to the power that lives within me and let it do its work as my life. That I get to be the observer, not the dictator. And in the back of my mind, I have all those lessons. My father sitting me up on a feed barrel going, you're an Ellis, by God, you don't take nothing from nobody. You earn your way, or your way is the highway. That's how you live your life. Now, when you're 7, that message is just in there. And it begins to frame everything. And so then you grow up, and all of a sudden you realize you're exhausted, and you don't know why, because you don't even know that asking for help is a concept. It's not even an option to consider. Because you're an Ellis, by God, and it means all these things. Now, that's generational from the South. My father thought he was doing the best thing he could to prepare his kids. Now, I can stay stuck in what a buffoon he was for sharing that, or I can understand that was the best he had to offer, and find the ways that it actually served me through my life in situations where if I had waited on someone else, I'd still be waiting. We'd have never met, because I'd still be back about 20 years. I'd still be waiting. So there is a time where we take responsibility. This whole teaching is affirmative, which means we're all about forward motion. That doesn't mean that everything we've accumulated along the way stays on the trail behind us. I have a buddy in Santa Rosa who we used to laugh. It was like when we sat down and really looked at our lives, it's like we're running as fast as we can, and we have all these cargo bins behind us, and we just keep shoveling life and throwing it backwards. And there are all these railroad cars full of our stuff. And the only solution is to stop. And the only awareness in those moments is that when I do, all that stuff's going to hit. Because I know it's there. And so we stop and we just let it come. Because here's the good news. There's no surprises in those cargo cars. We put it all in there. But we run from it like it's something, it's like the boogeyman that we've never met. And it's just our path. There's nothing scary there. Quite frankly, the huge realization is when we really get that the reason it's back there is because we've already been through it. We don't have to redo it. What we do get to do is when we stop, it all hits. We get to unhook the cars, brush ourselves off, thank you for the gift of you, and then we get to move on. But until we take responsibility to unhook the cars, we don't get to do that. And so it keeps showing up. Doris Jones was like the Emma Curtis Hopkins of Santa Rosa practitioners. She was a teacher's teacher. And Doris Jones used to tell folks, instead of trying to pray something away, you look it square in the eye and say, you stay right here until I've gotten every gift I brought you here to give me. Now imagine doing that with the toughest things in your life. Imagine going into your heart and finding that courage with the people that you want to leave the planet. And we all have them, if we're being honest. The jobs that you want to completely change. The partners that we love and we would love them to go away for a while, maybe permanently. Yeah. What if you stood in the midst of that and inside you stay right here until I've learned everything I brought you here to teach me? Because unless you're a kidnap victim, you participated in creating this relationship. But sometimes, don't we act like kidnap victims? It's like we dated, and we got engaged, and we planned the marriage, and then we got married, and then we act like we're trapped. Like somehow they kidnapped us. Like, there's bolts on the door. We get up and go to work, come home every day, but we can't, leave if we want to. You can. And if that is your constant focus in your relationship, you might want to pay attention to that. And if your conscious focus is on changing the other person, here's the good news. Everything you need to change about you, you already have notice of. Because everything you're pointing at them is your stuff. Okay. If I want Deborah to change something, that's not about Deborah. That's about me. What am I irritated about? And where is that irritation in me? Where is the impatience in me? Where have I failed to communicate my needs clearly? Where am I not taking responsibility for me and I want to blame her? Reverend Dr. Edward Villiam in Santa Rosa once said, marriage is a high holy commitment to rapid growth. And there are moments where I get angry at Edward because I'm convinced if he didn't say it, it wouldn't be true. Which is ridiculous, but that's where my mind goes. That the only reason this is hard is because he said that and he spoke it into the law, so it must be his fault. And I suspect it wasn't original. How often do we simply refuse to stand in the courage of love, to look at ourselves honestly, objectively? And why don't we? Because we're raised in a system of reward and punishment. Okay? If you have the book, The Four Agreements, go home and read the first chapter. Just the first chapter. Don't worry about the rest of the book until you understand everything in that first chapter. Because what he so brilliantly articulates in that first chapter is how we're programmed. That language is our programming. Just like, we're born, babies are born a blank hard drive. And then we start programming them with language. Tell them who they are and what they are. How they're going to be when they grow up. Tell them what's expected. And what happens when we step out of what's expected? Punishment to get us back in line. What happens when we do what's expected? Reward. We are all conditioned by punishment and reward. And just like this whole duality of oneness versus living in a physical world, the very challenge of changing our programming, and when I read this, when Don Miguel Ruiz gave me this gift, I wanted to just run over and kiss him. And I didn't know where he was, so I couldn't do that. The very language that we're using to change our programming is the same language of our programming. And so if we are not really clear, if we fail to redefine the meaning of the words that we're using, we're really it's a no-win situation. Because the whole time I'm telling myself something different, I'm strengthening the very program that I'm trying to change. If I was taught that love is conditional, that when you love me, if you love me, because you love me, all of those things, I'm guessing I'm not the only one in the room that had that lesson. And so if I'm approaching love with that definition, no matter what I tell myself about love, that's what's operating. Not what I want to be operating, but what I believe. It is done unto us as we believe. Now, for years, I heard that as really a nasty universe going, it's done unto you as you believe. Well, it is. Now, the good news is I get to change what I believe. Just because I was programmed doesn't make it true. It's not true that because my last name is Ellis, I have to go through life pushing everybody away. That doesn't mean that. I have to reframe, re-educate myself about what my last name means. And all it means is that I was born in a gene pool that started with Robert Carroll Ellis III as my father. That's all it means. And so we begin to free ourselves. But we can't do that if we refuse to look at our beliefs. And all too often, instead of exercising the courage to look honestly at what's in our heart, we look at our wish list. We wish it was different. I hope it's going to be different, without taking ultimate responsibility to make it different. Courage is the activity of responsibility. William Glasser, founder of reality therapy, said, "The level of happiness that we experience is directly equivalent to the responsibility we choose to accept for our lives." Responsibility is not a fun word in our culture, and we like to give it away. I want you to act the way I want. I want you to be responsible for my happiness. And it doesn't work that way. Let's take this into prayer. Divine, infinite oneness, perfect peace, absolute reality, love beyond anything that my humanness can ever fully comprehend. Peace that literally calms every troubled sea. Serenity that is never ruffled. This is the truth of what created us. And if that is its nature, and we are created out of it, by it, to be it in form, then all of that must be our nature too. That peace that passes all understanding lives within me. That love that sees beyond condition, beyond behavior, beyond anything that I experience in this human realm, lives within me. Absolutely unrestricted flow of abundance is ours now. It always has been. And in this moment, I claim and affirm for each of us that we stand squarely in those moments of discontent and exercise the courage born in our hearts that we call love to look that squarely in the face, to call it a liar and send it packing, because it has no place in our being. And so we release it, we love it, and we let it go, so that we can step more fully into that kingdom 4 consciousness, where we align perfectly with that which created us, to allow it to express its life, its beauty, its power, its presence as us. That perfect alignment of oneness, that bliss that just knows itself and goes about the business of being itself. Grateful, grateful, grateful for every opportunity to stand and know the truth, to live the truth, and to hold one another as that truth. And so in this gratitude, I release my word into that activity of love and law that spoke the very words, as me. And so we know we let go because it's already done. There's no need to hold it. So we let go. We let it be. And I invite you, if this resonates with you and you are about claiming this for yourself, that you join me as we say together.
And so it is.